Since 1911, the Pierre Parts Store has been your one-stop shop. Family owned and operated for 4 generations, the Pierre Parts Store has served the community by providing groceries, hardware, home products, and much more, including a full-service lumber yard. Now, we've added the Thibodaux store to the family with the same values and service we've delivered for over 100 years. The Pierre Parts Store and the Thibodaux store, our family serving your family.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker with Terrebonne Home Care. Very glad you're joining us, however you may be joining us. And I have a treat for you. Rarely do we ever get 2 of our representatives at the same time. And I got to tell you, they've spent so much time together, so much time in session. We are so very glad to have with them, starting with Jerome Z. Zeringue, District 52. Thanks for joining us today, Z.
Thanks for having us, Keith. And again, you're right. I spent more time with Joe than I had my wife in the past 4 months.
Wow. And so, look, there's some good things in there.
What may make my wife happy.
Joe's pretty happy about it, too. So, I mean, that's awesome. And speaking of, we have Joe Orgeron as well, Louisiana State Representative, District 54. Joe, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Keith.
We appreciate it. So maybe just, guys, if you don't mind, Z, just a general idea, a wrap up. The session just finished. But, man, it's been a long haul since January. But this session was important. You got a lot of work done.
We have. And think back, we started in January. There was a crime session, and then we had special sessions to try to address some things. But ultimately, it culminated in successes overall in terms of where we're moving the state forward. And in regard to the budget, some of the things that are important, the state budget, we spent less this year than we had last year, but primarily because of the reduction in federal funds.
Federal funds, right.
But the state growth is, anytime you reduce or keep state growth in less than 3%, it's considered pretty much a win.
Okay.
And growth has been right at around 2.14%.
Wow.
And we did, within the budget, we have made some significant dollars, or allocated significant dollars to improvements. So like I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but primarily when there's a surplus, we have a surplus and an excess. And with that, part of it has to go or dedicated to budget stabilization. We also have, if there's a increase in corporate taxes, it goes to the Revenue Stabilization Fund.
Right.
And in our rainy day fund, we will have close to $1 billion.
Wow.
It's the first time we've ever been that much in the Budget Stabilization Fund, which is going to be important because we're anticipating a deficit next year, and that may help or play into that, what we could use to offset some of that deficit. But the revenue stabilization, which is when the corporate sales tax reaches a certain level, it goes into a fund that when it reaches $5 billion, it's going to be used for infrastructure dollars. Well, what the legislature did this term is have taken $717 million, and instead of going to the revenue stabilization, try to get some shovel-ready projects, advance some of the things that are critically needed. So $390 million will be transferred to the Department of Transportation infrastructure funds to get roads and bridge work that needs to be done.
Right.
157 will go to the Criminal Justice First Responder Fund, which will fund a lot of the initiatives through the crime session that we had, special session on crime. We also put $94 million to the Higher Education Campus Revitalization Fund. There are hundreds, actually over $1 billion in terms of deferred maintenance that universities need to address. And this will go, obviously it's not going to completely wipe out the need,
right.
but it's going to address critical needs in terms of the universities, get some of that deferred maintenance taken care of, and also $75 million to the water sector fund. That's been a pretty successful program in addressing a lot of the needs. It's a $4 billion backlog in water projects for the state that, we still have people in North Louisiana bathing and drinking in brown water, and some of those communities can't afford to make the improvements. So this will continue. We've put over $1 billion into that program. We have another $75 million to get some of those projects in place.
Wow. I love the allocation and identifying the need.
Yeah.
And let's not just defer this money. Let's use it where we know there's a critical need. And so great call on that.
And speaking of critical need, we did put an additional stipend of $2,000 per teachers. Again, it's frustrating. I know the teachers, they want the increase in terms of being part of the salary. The last 2 years, it's been stipends, which they still get the money, but it's not built into the salary, which I know we need to go work toward getting that in there, but at least they'll get an additional $2,000 in the salary this year, and support workers will get $1,000 in terms of what they need. Early childhood education, we put, as you know how important early childhood education is. We put an additional 40. There's over 400 million, but there's several programs. We put an additional 40 million into that, and Steve Carter Literacy Program to help kids read, another 7 million into that. Well, also on the local level, I know I wanted to touch on before we get out of this segment, there's some things in terms of HB2 in terms of projects on the local level, and the Capital Outlay Savings Fund, there was 133 million that are going to go to DOT highway programs and other capital outlay programs. But on the local level, a couple things that are important to our region. 13 million is going to go to the Fletcher Technical Community College Agriculture Training Facility, which is going to work with Fletcher and increase its program, especially when it comes to agriculture. There's also an additional 11.5 million to the LUMCON, the research vessel that is going to be important. Acadiana is just going to have to be mothballed. I mean, it's an old ship, but it does great work. And this will allow the investment in that vessel that will continue the good work that the Acadian have done, but also provide and offer opportunities where other universities throughout the nation, throughout the world, actually come and utilize that vessel for research. And so those are some of the critical, important things that we're able to accomplish both on a local level and a statewide level.
Well, I love the idea of the fact that we can look at and take a really bird's eye view of where we are and where we have saving some money, right? But where do we use that money and what's it used for? And the fact that I love for our local listeners to go, oh, we're getting some of that help down here. And that's the value of what the two of you always do, fighting for our districts here, fighting for making sure that we get help down here. And so we're very thankful and appreciative for that. And Z, thanks for the update financially. Joe, thank you for being so patient. We're going to take a short break. We'll come back and go through all the stuff in your wrap up, and then we'll spend a little bit more time here educating everyone about what y'all have learned. All right, take a break. All right, guys, do that with us. We'll be right back with Z and Joe with more updates from their session.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Alford and Associates for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of Bayou Time. Again, your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker, right here with Jerome Home Care. Very glad that you're joining us, and even more glad that we have Zeringue, District 52, Joe Orgeron, District 54. And Joe, thanks again for sitting in, going through all those updates. Appreciate it, Z, being able to do that. But tell us a little bit about what you were able to do and get accomplished, and all the hard work that you've been doing since January as well.
Yeah, well, Z had mentioned that since January, we did a redistricting session, a crime session in the regular session, with the opportunity or the intent to possibly do a constitutional convention. So it was very, very ambitious and challenging, but at least we managed to get through the regular session and get some good legislation done. For me, I was happy to get some of my capital outlay projects for my area done, and even work on some that are not in my area. For one, I'm going to highlight Nichols University got their nursing school funding to rebuild a new building.
A new building
school.
Just very necessary as we see these nursing shortages.
Right, and I know Z had touched upon the surplus money that's going to go into the water sector, and with that, I had been not necessarily those dollars, but in capital outlay, working to get Gaines, the community of Gaines, which is in my district, a new water line, an updated water line, and we at least got them in the system to start working on that. Some of the legislature that did go through that was focused on both election integrity and you're going to be seeing in news reports about Secretary of State Nancy Landry had put forth 11 different bills, and pretty much all 11 of them passed, which was real good. It's all proponent items, all good things to better our state and our election processes for good, clear, transparent elections. And on the insurance side, which is important to everybody in the Bayou region, increasing, making changes. There was a suite of bills that would have helped out and allow more insurance companies to look over the fence of Louisiana and say, there's not too many bullies in here. I guess we're going to come in because we've actually been kind of a rough playground, both meteorologically speaking, with the storms, but also litigiously with all the legal aspects, and we were able to, I guess, get 2/3 of what was proposed to get done, and more of the legal reforms hit uphill climbs and didn't get done. So that was a little disappointing.
Right.
That we got, wish we could have got all 3 legs of the stool to be done, but with 2 out of 3 for now is where we're at. Also, one of the signature legislations that I worked on, third time, is my 3rd year of running this bill, and it's basically mimics what it's the state equivalent of what's going to be happening in the near future in Washington, which is any revenue that is received by the state from offshore energy. And we already have a dedication so that oil and gas, per se by name, oil and gas activity goes to coastal restoration, to our Gulf Coast Restoration Fund. But right now, if any new energy from whatever comes down the pipe, solar, wind farms, wave action, tidal currents, none of that is dedicated and needed to be changed to be able to be married with the existing oil and gas. And I was able to actually successfully pass that bill this year and the constitutional amendment, because with the Constitution there was concerns that it would conflict if we were to also have a constitutional convention. Okay. That might undedicate some of the oil and gas dedicated revenues. Right. So now on the November 5th presidential ballot, in addition to that, it's right now it stands that that'll be an additional choice for the people to choose, that basically says to add all of the above energy sources derived from offshore to be married with the oil and gas money to go to be dedicated to the coast. And as I had might have mentioned earlier, there's a fly-in event, or an event that happens on an annual basis where people from Louisiana, nonprofits, industry, legislators, everybody goes up to Washington to primarily meet with congressmen and senators from other areas of the country, maybe even in any of the inland states, to let them know how important for the national economy what Louisiana does with our ports and our working coast, and how important and dedicated we are that any of these revenues we generate from offshore energy, regardless of the form of the energy, that we put it right back in to our coastal environment in order to improve it. And with that, been watching changes in CPRA and fighting for continued action with all of the projects that are part of the master plan. So that's one of my big things, and Z's as well. I mean,
Right.
Z's right there alongside. Sometimes we feel that we're the coastal champions for South Louisiana and the Bayou region.
Well, it's not the first time it's been mentioned, that's for sure. And so we're so very glad that you're being able to fight for that. More importantly, Joe, congratulations. I mean, it's been 3 years to get that bill passed, just to make people aware that, listen, we just want to make sure that we get included, that whatever it is that we can do, we want to make sure that oil and gas money stays here to help the coast, because that's what it's coming in for to do. And we want to make sure with anything else, any other options. We talk to Chet Chesson all the time about that, about those kinds of options that we have. Anything additional, we want to make sure it stays to make sure that we're keeping the coast what we need for it. So thank y'all for fighting the good fight on that. It's an everyday battle, I know. It's something that we talk about, but I love the fact that we're going up to Washington to talk about letting everybody else know how important that is. It's just really, really cool. I love it. Gentlemen, thank you both. We're going to take a break. We'll come back and do just one more wrap up for how things went for you guys in the session. All right, guys, we'll be right back. Come back and join us right here on Bayou Time.
Social media segment is brought to you by Terrebonne General Health System. Your health is our legacy. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bork, know your rights.
Hello and welcome back to this edition of Bayou Time. Again, your host, Keith Whiteside. Thank you so much for joining us as we have Zeringue and Joe Orgeron, Districts 52 and 54. Gentlemen, thank you again for joining us. We appreciate it. And more importantly, congratulations, because there's a lot of hard work that goes into really kind of helping other people go, listen, this just makes sense. Can we do this? It seems like there's been a lot of positivity here just since January, starting with the crime session that you had and really doing this next session. It seems like a lot's gotten done. A lot has been said, yes. So knowing that, how are we looking for moving forward?
Well, we touched on, and Joe mentioned the insurance, especially for here in South Louisiana, how important insurance is. I mean, I have calls, typically several calls a week. It was a lot more, but people are starting to realize it's, the problem is going to be difficult to fix and remedy because of the fact that insurance is a private business. We can't, and it's difficult to legislate the private aspect because, quite frankly, the insurance companies can just say, well, I'm just going to go somewhere else where there's less risk and assurances of premiums and getting the premiums paid. But Commissioner Temple put package together, and as Joe mentioned, significant portion was passed. The fortified roof program, which is going to extend that. That's always good.
Right. The
3-year rule was enacted, which will phase out the where insurers were barred from dropping insurers after 3 years. They have to, if they write them, they have to keep them for 3 years. They've been there for 3 years.
Okay.
And then there's the fair claims policy where homeowners would now be allowed more time to pay. The insurers would be more time to pay claims, and insurance rates allows insurers to increase rates without prior approval, which all those things sound like they're anti-consumer, and people perceive it as such. And I get it because, look, I'm not in the insurance business, but frankly, what Commissioner Temple and a lot of the industry is saying, the insurance industry, is that Louisiana puts them at an unfair competitive disadvantage,
right.
so that they can't compete, and so they are less likely to come here. So the intention, and Joe mentioned some of the legal aspects, that's another, hopefully we can address some of that with tort reform. But at least this is a step, according to the industry, in the right direction in reducing some of that. We've also did some things on THC and put some rules and regulations in regard to 2HC and the sale of that. And I know Joe may have a few more bills he'd like to talk about. There's a few obscure things we can talk about as well.
Okay. Go ahead,
I know that in watching Facebook and what my constituency is saying, like Z had noted, some of these insurance things look like they're anti-consumer. Like, 3-year rule. I've been there with my insurance company for 3 years. Now they can't drop me, and there's the legislature getting rid of that rule. What good does that do? But they need to understand that sort of rule, there's only one state in the nation that has that. And additionally, they actually brought in a global aspect that they don't know of anything. They don't know of contracts like that exist anywhere else in the world. So just to give you an idea, we all know Nationwide is on your side. I'm not doing a commercial for Nationwide, but they do write in 49 states. There is one particular state that they do not write in, and it's in here. Yeah. So that's why whenever I said, the answer to our lower insurance premiums is getting more competition to come into Louisiana. And even though some moved out following the storms, many came around the side of the fence of the playground and looked in it and just saw big bullies and just said, basically, we're not going in unless there's change. So the changes that we did, despite maybe appearing superficially to be anti-consumer, or actually to get them to come over the fence and come in and write more policies and bring down the prices.
Right.
So, but we also got to do, every time we have a storm, we need to work on resiliency, both in our flood systems, flood protection systems, drainage, fortified roof, everything, codes, and things like that. So it's really important to do that.
Yeah, and it's hard to talk about insurance without at least kind of mentioning risk rating 2.0, where that's still a huge battle as we're challenging the government to say they still have not released the information about where they came up with the idea for risk
their black
rating.
box.
Right.
What makes that pricing work in that black box?
Right.
Where mine might have not gone up, but my neighbor right next to me went up by a factor of 5 or 10.
Right.
And I want to say that if anybody's familiar with the G&O Inc. Company, their website, there may be, if you look in there, they have I think every 2 weeks a webinar where there's one particular person within that organization that just focuses on the battle of getting risk rating 2.0 proper. And of course, because we're always in a battle with FEMA, Army Corps of Engineers, to prove that our levies, some of them may not be accepted by Army Corps of Engineers. So the risk rating 2.0 map appears to not be there. But being in Lower Lafourche, where we took the brunt of Hurricane Ida and didn't have any flooding whatsoever, we won credit for that.
Right.
And I'll say that one additional piece of background legislation that I ran was actually to bring Louisiana to a within the nation, that I'm going to just mention the National Geodetic Society, which kind of like the Naval Observatory and how benchmarks and GPS surveying is all done.
Right.
I ran a bill that actually brings Louisiana to the forefront, so that as soon as new, more accurate standards are adopted, we will be on the forefront to be able to utilize them. And that's not so much important for X and Y and lat and long in our area as much as it is for the height of the levees and subsidence versus compaction of levees. And that bill, I didn't make it up on my own. It was actually the 3 levee systems in the Bayou region that asked me to run that.
Wow. Well, listen, it's a lot of hard work, and we're very, very glad that you guys are done with session. We're looking at what may happen with this congressional delegation, right?
Well, Constitutional Convention, yes.
Right. Yeah. And so hopefully you guys will get an enjoyable break, right? I know you're always listening to your constituents and what they need, but we're very thankful that you came and give the updates today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Keith. Thanks for having us.
All right, guys, that will do it for this particular segment and this Bayou Time, but don't go anywhere. I got a whole lot more local programming right here on HTV.